Alright, hello everybody, welcome back to another episode, or first one of this kind, where I'm actually filming stuff. Today we are going to go over the evaluation of BS in a TLDR format, as the previous videos have been quite elaborate and long. I will just do this in maybe 15 minutes. So it's the evaluation of BS, proving that it works through scientific means. Alright, so what does that proof consist of? What is going to be the line of evidence by which we can, I guess, conclude that this, at least obviously in theory, because there's not any scientific research directly on it, but at least in theory we can say, yeah, this works on a more concrete basis than just Wolff's law, right? That's overly simple. So it's going to consist of 3 questions. So the first one is going to be, does bone even have enough adaptive ability to induce a meaningful amount of growth? Meaningful here is going to be defined as an amount that is going to influence outward facial appearance. So can bone grow from a stressor, a stimuli, enough for it to be seen by your eye, right, on the face, obviously. And then after we conclude that, if it does have the ability, then we gotta find out what kind of stress needs to be needs to be inflicted upon the bone for it to grow that meaningful amount, right? So we're going to define stress as strain, which is deformation. I'm going to, you can just Google it, I'm not going to explain it, it's simple physics. And then what kind of force needs to be applied to the bone for that strain to happen, and that's going to be stress, right? All right, so or stimuli. And then does BS produce those forces to inflict such stress or stimuli, right, to inflict such strain? And then if you go back, the line of evidence goes as following: BS inflicts a certain force, and that force is great enough to, it produces a strain large enough for bone to interpret it as stimuli to grow a meaningful amount. So that's the line of evidence. Alright, so let's just get a little bit into the research and answer those 3 questions to find out if it works, at least on a theoretical basis. So let's go over the first question, which is going to be answered through Harold Frost's research in the field of osteology. What he did is researched, the relationship between strain and adaptive response, and he found the kind of the upper threshold of what kind of physiologic adaptation you can expect from a bone after it's been stimulated physically, right, by a force. And he found that if we limit bone formation to be only lamellar, so no woven bone, which is pretty much like bone's version of scar tissue in simpler terms, all of this, there is a more explained, elaborate version in the other videos, so I'm not going to explain what woven bone is. You can Google it if you're questioning it. But for lamellar bone formation, the maximum adaptive ability is 2 cubic millimeters per square millimeter of bone per year, which, if we then compare, put it on a human's face, we can pretty confidently say that that's good enough amount for it to be meaningful growth, for it to be seen from outwards, because there are surgical implants that people get that are less than 2 millimeters, right, 2 cubic millimeters per square millimeter of bone, and they do make an impact on outwards facial appearance. So we can say that this kind of adaptive ability is good enough. Now we gotta find out what stress is required to induce such adaptive ability, right, for that adaptive response. We're going to obviously do that through strain and frequency. So bone does not really adapt to static strains. If you press on your femur, it's not going to grow, right? So if you press here on the mandible, it's not like it's going to start growing outwards, but it does respond to these kind of pulsatile stressors. So a force rises and then it falls and then rises and then it falls, which is something that is seen in exercise, in a locomotion, and obviously in BS. And it's also the kind of strain that is being used in research. The way that they do it is usually they take red solenoid, stuff like that, and they press. I can't really do it here with the microphone, but a force here and a force in the elbow, and then they pulse it, and obviously the radius experience stress, strain, whatever. So what kind of, how hard do you need to press, and how frequent, right? So those are the two variables, how hard and how frequent. Also obviously the number of pulses, right? So there's kind of going to be 3 frequencies when you're doing a BS program. So strain, you have the diagram here on the screen. Hopefully I'm going to put it up. You can tell by Frost's graph that strains between 1000 to 3000 microstrains at a frequency of 1 Hz achieve an adaptive growth response consisting of lamellar bone. So we know that we need to gravitate our strains around that 2000 microstrain mark in order to achieve growth, but not step over that overload threshold where we can accumulate fatigue and risk damage and injury. Now, the effect of frequency, I'm going to skip over here. It's quite complicated and I cannot really dumb it down in a good way, but pretty much the higher the frequency, the stress that is applied has more adaptive, it's more stimulating. It's a bit more complicated than that, and I'm not going to get into it. Most research is done on 1 Hz, and the strains that become stimulating are 900, 1000, all the way to 2000 microstrains and beyond it. Although at the 3000 microstrain, usually I think woven bone starts to appear. Right, it's going to depend on a lot of things, but around that area. So it's not going to be 300,000, it's going to be around 2000. So now we gotta make a connection between deformation and adaptive response. We have pretty much done that. And does BS produce the adequate stress that we have just kind of elaborated on what it needs to be? The way we're going to do that is to see how much force, right, you produce by the kind of hits that you would use in BS. I would kind of make an analog between the BS hits and breaking an egg. But it's pretty much the same force. Maybe you're going to BS a little bit lighter. And then you can just Google, what force you need to break an egg, and it's around 20 newtons. And then if you plug that, 20 newtons is right. So Newton is pretty much like pressure per area. And then if you take the area is going to be around 1 millimeter square, you can do that by, you take a hard object, you can put some marker on it, and then you hit a piece of paper, and you see that, a few pieces of paper to stimulate soft tissue. I have explained this in the more elaborate version. The area upon which the force is exerted on is around 1 millimeter squared. So if you take those two values that we just approximated, force and area, we can calculate the approximate pressure that is exerted on bone, which will be 20 megapascal, through which we can then, using Young's module, calculate the strain that is inflicted on bone. Just quickly, Young's module is a number that is a characteristic of a certain material that tells us how it responds to pressure or stress, in a sense of how much it deforms. So if we use the pressure that we just approximated and Young's module of bone, we can see that these kind of stresses generated by BS inflict a strain of around 2 to 3000 microstrain. Those same values were also calculated by Harold Frost, which basically answers and confirms our last question of, does BS produce a force large enough to generate a strain great enough for bone to adapt, grow in a meaningful amount. One thing I forgot to mention in the critique part is the fact that bone is not an isotropic material due to its lamellar structure, meaning that it doesn't deform the same way depending on in which direction the stress is being applied at. So the Young's module can have different values depending on in which direction stress is being applied. The same argument against that remains. The exact precision is not a requirement here. Just go over a few critiques. I think the most critiquable part of the examination is going to be the last one, the last step, where we kinda are using a dubious extrapolation of saying that right, the hit is going to be the same as breaking an egg, and then right, egg is 20 newtons. It is kind of dubious, but what I would use to defend against the critique is that here we're not really looking for a precision of right 10%, right? Like, we're not trying to reach exactly 1832 microstrain. Like, the point is, it's in that ballpark, it's in there, that area, right? It's in that range. It's not, we didn't find, like, if we found that you would need to do, I don't know, 20,000, 100,000 microstrains to induce a meaningful growth, and hitting it with a force of breaking an egg produces 2,000 microstrains, then obviously, yeah, sure. And theoretically, it doesn't work because you will need to use 100 times larger force, and that's not really capable, right? You're not going to smash it that hard. Then I would say, yeah, all right, it doesn't work theoretically, but we are somewhere in that ballpark, in that range, and I'd say that a possible mistake of, you know, a factor of 0.5 to 2x of a mistake in the calculation, who cares? It's in that range. For me, this is enough to be convinced that theoretically it does work, and then you will have to put it obviously in practice, and I have done that for a few years, so I'm even more convinced obviously that it works. People online have done it. Most of the people that said it doesn't are people who use theory, and I have just debunked the theory in a much more complex and a more sophisticated manner than other people do, on the both sides, on the it doesn't work or on the it does work side. So pretty much not going to prolong this anymore. I want this to be a TLDR. The next episode we are going to talk about the programming recommendations, right? So frequency, force, how many times per day should you take rest periods in a micro sense, right? Weekly breaks, daily breaks, split the volume of one day into like 2, 4, whatever, how many sessions. We are going to dive into that kind of research, and it has all been researched and done, and I can't wait really to get into it. It's quite interesting actually. There's a big pile of research that, right, this sphere of ours, I don't want to name it, has not delved into, and I'm going to try to do that. So yeah, pretty much stick around, watch that video, and if you have any questions, right, leave them in the comments. You can also reach to me on the forum through the email. It's all in the description. So yeah, have fun and good luck. Don't break any of your stuff on your face.